Hi there, I'm Keith Aichele, and I'm going to take you through the 5 core elements of a rent-to-own transaction. This way you understand how does a rent-to-own home purchase work. Now, again, we're only going to cover off the real basics in this short video. We have hours of free training if you really want to go in depth to how these transactions work, and you should if you're serious about wanting to consider getting into a rent-to-own. Then at the very end, I'm going to give you a bonus, which is how to protect yourself so that the seller does not sell the home out from underneath you. Obviously, very important to know if you're going to get involved in a rent-to-own transaction. So stay tuned to the end to be able to catch that. Now, let's go ahead and get started. The fundamentals of a rent-to-own and the concept is pretty simple, right? You rent the property for a period of time, could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and typically anywhere over that period of time, up until the end, you have the right to be able to purchase that property. That's what a rent-to-own is. Now, there are 5 core elements to that transaction. The first is what we call the rent payment. And of course, as you would suspect, this is your monthly payment for the rent on the property. Now, one thing you need to be aware is that your rent payment on a rent-to-own is typically going to be higher than what you might have rented the property normally for. And that's because you're paying extra for the rights to be able to purchase that property, again, at some point in the future, hopefully sooner than later, but however long it may take you to be ready to buy the home outright. So you have a rent payment that you need to negotiate with the seller. The second element is what we call a rent credit. Now, a rent credit is a portion of the monthly payment that goes towards your down payment when you buy it ultimately again, at the end of the period or sometime along the window. As soon as you're ready and you're wanting to buy it, you execute your option. Now, that rent credit is something that you need to negotiate with your sellers, and there's no, fixed in stone requirement of what that amount needs to be. But let's say you were renting a property for $1,600 and that same property would normally do a straight rental at $1,500. You might get anywhere from $50 to $100 to $150 a month of your monthly payments on time as a rent credit towards the purchase. So you're basically paying a little bit more every month for the ability to purchase it later, and that's coming back to you. So it's kind of like a forced savings account. Another way to also think about it is when you purchase, depending on if that credit brings you below market rent, you might actually be renting the property for less than what it would cost you on a straight rental, right? So if you had a $1,600 a month rent payment, and $150 rent credit, that would put you at $1,450 a month after your credit's applied. And if that property rents on a regular rent, straight rent, for $1,500, you're actually ahead of the game. So again, keep in mind that rent credit. We go deeper into the training of how to structure that, whether the right amounts or some things that maybe expect. But keep in mind, a rent credit is something you want to make sure is built into your rent-to-own agreements. The next element in your rent-to-own transaction is going to be the purchase price. Now, what you are normally doing is agreeing to the purchase price up front for what you will buy the property for. Now, it may not be a fixed price over each year, meaning this. You might start with a price if you buy in year 1, price in year 2, price in year 3, and so it might escalate depending on when you purchase the property. It might be based on today's value plus an appreciation amount. So it can vary of how the purchase price is actually structured. However, you should have some sense of what the purchase price will be when you go to buy it in the future. You do not want to get into a rent-to-own where it's, when you're able to buy, we'll talk about the price at that point in time. No. You want to have a very clear picture for yourself on what that price will be. So remember, as you're building out your rent-to-own transaction, make sure you have a clearly defined purchase price or formula to getting to a purchase price in your contract. The fourth element as part of this transaction is going to be the option payment. Now, the option payment is equivalent to, think of it as a down payment, which should normally go towards the purchase of the home when you execute your option to buy the home. In this option payment can vary depending on who you're working with. Some sellers are going to ask for significant amounts of money, meaning that $15,000, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. It also depends on the price of the home too, but on a regular kind of mainstream home, you should expect probably around $5,000 to $10,000. At least with the investors that we work and how we run our rent-to-owns, we try to keep it very reasonable for buyers that are coming in. Now keep in mind, that option payment is your commitment to purchase the property and get the rights to buy it at any time you want, and holding the seller back from being able to sell it to anybody else. That option payment, most of the time, will not come back to you if you do not purchase the home. So you've got to be prepared and be committed to put that money down, and if you don't execute your option for any reason, it is going to be something that the seller gets to keep. But again, when you do execute the purchase, it's important that you are getting that credit as towards your down payment. So that's the option payment. The fifth and last core element I want to talk about here is the option term. And this is the period of time at which you get to be able to execute your options. So for example, you can rent it for 2 years or 3 years and buy the property anytime up until that point. Could be 5 years, could be 10 years, could be 20 or 30 years. There is no hard, fast rule about what that term is. There are certain states that do not allow rent-to-owns to be structured in the way that I'm describing here. You have to use a different form of contracts, and we cover that in more advanced training. But fundamentally, you have an option term, an option period, at which you rent the property and you have that option to buy. So those are the 5 core elements of a rent-to-own transaction at a very high level. Now, if you want to learn even more about a rent-to-own, which if you're serious about getting into rent-to-own, you want to make sure you do, we've actually put together a free book that you can pick up right now. There's a link down below for the right way to rent-to-own homes, how to buy smarter than everyone else. So pick up that book. Inside there, we share a tremendous number of strategies about the fundamentals, how to find the right property, how to protect yourself, how to structure your agreements. So be sure to pick that up for absolutely free. Now, I want to move on to the bonus for you, which is how to protect yourself from the seller selling the home out from under you. And the way that you do this is that you build into your agreement the ability for you to file a memorandum of option on the property. Because what this is going to do is it's basically going to encumber or put a lien on the property such that they cannot sell the property without your knowledge and without you being involved in the transaction. And that's going to be very, very important, because you don't want to spend all your time over several years building up the home ownership only to find out that the home has been sold out from underneath you. Now, there are certainly other things that you can do to protect your investment and make sure it doesn't get sold out from underneath you. So watch some of our other training videos, or be sure to pick up the free book mentioned below. And if you like the content that you're learning here, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on some of the new content we publish to our channel. Thanks for joining here today.